Okay, yes, so first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Okay. So, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this very nice conference. And so now it might be the time for the Globular Amphora.
Yes.
And we are both happy that we could present you maybe some results or some thoughts about the Globular Amphora. Especially the linking archives of socio-cultural transformations might be the first introductory talk here. And Carsten Wenting asked me to do some advertisement for Sidestone. I just do it because there is a new book published about Globular Amphora, and I think he's very happy about. No, he's not happy about that. Okay, this should be the theme today. It's not working.
It's working.
It's working, okay. Yeah, first of all, maybe as a memory to you, Globular Amphora are distributed in an area of about 240,000 square kilometers between, let's say, the North Sea and here the Moldavian area of Podolia and Volhynia. And we are talking on a distribution area in the northern European plain. On the one hand, then the lower mountain range of Central Europe, for example, and then mainly also the plateaus here in Western Ukraine, for example, and in Moldavia. If we look at the distribution of if we look at the published Globular Amphora with the profile, we are talking about 2,000 Globular Amphora worldwide. So not as much as, for example, the bell beakers with about 14,000 bell beakers, which had been published in an appropriate way. But you already could see here on this map that there are some, let's say, distribution core areas visible. On the one hand here in the western area near the Elbe, and on the other side here on the Baltic-Pontic direction from at the Vistula up here to the Sirit. The chronology of Globular Amphora, and we talk here mainly about classical Globular Amphora periods, so phases or sites where really Globular Amphora appear. There are a lot of sites already and a lot of regions with C14 dating, which allows Bayesian statistics. It is quite clear that we are mainly talking about a period between 3200, 3100 BC and 2700 BC, with some later developments, for example, in the East. Transformations. We had put into our title socio-cultural or socio-environmental transformations. If we talk about transformations, surely we should define them somehow. And we would define them as sustainable and significant changes within societies triggered and shaped by socio-environmental components and forces. And if we look at, let's say, European history, there are, in prehistory, at least about, I would say, 14, 15 changes on a supra-regional scale. And this change happening around 3000 BC is such a transformation. But transformations, I mean, they could be, on the one hand, a kind of collapse or a real transformation in contrast to the stability. And I think the question, if we are really talking about these kind of transformations, has to be answered in the different areas or regions, because it could be very diverse. If we look at your environmental records, to put it this way, on a general scale, I mean, you talked around already this morning about these changes in the environment or the climate partly around 3200, 3100 BC, which is in principle visible between the British Isles and at least here Little Poland in the north, to talk about this. It is obvious if we look, for example, and at the C14 record and the sub-calibration of the C14 record in our area on a wider scale, there's something happening here in around 3000 DC with a decrease in human activities visible in the archaeological record, but also a decrease in the land opening. So there is a reforestation in many of these areas, and even there is a tendency of a reduction of colluvial sedimentation, which is linked to agriculture. Nevertheless, Globular Amphora, talking about this huge area here, it is quite obvious that the climatic changes were visible in very different ways in the different areas of Europe. For example, in respect to temperature around 2900 BC, there are areas with an increase in temperature and another areas with a decrease in temperature. And Globular Amphora, the Globular Amphora phenomenon is covering all these different areas. It's also true for the precipitation, which is, for example, here modeled in a very different way with an increase of precipitation in northern Germany and a decrease in northern Poland, to come up with one example. In respect to human activities, if we take the SPDs of the C14 dates as a kind of proxy for human activity, also huge differences are visible in Europe. For example, between 3200 and 3000 BC, there's an increase in activities here in this northern area or here in other areas, and a decrease, for example, in the Paris Basin. And in the time period between 3000 BC to 2800 BC, an increase in human activities is especially here in the western part visible, and a decrease in this eastern part. Transformation. Transformation could mean continuity or discontinuity in the different spheres we are, or in the different societal spheres which are represented in our archives. On a European level, again, if we translate it into archaeology, between 3200 and 3000 BC, these bluish areas are the areas with a decrease in human activities. Here, the increase, which is visible in the Pontic area or here in the Carpathian Basin, while between 3000 and 2800 BC, the contrast is different. So between these areas here of, let's say, the Atlantic facade and Scandinavia and parts of Central Europe, with an increase in activities and a decrease here in this bluish color. Background are some calibrations of the C14 dates. From the archaeological record, okay, surely there are continuities. This change around 3000 BC is not, I would say, a transformation which is affecting all the society. Only parts of the society are affected, and I don't want to go into detail here, but it is quite clear that we are not talking about the transformation of the whole society. So here sometimes we like, let's call it statistics, and in a new publication we tried to map with principal component analysis, let's say, transformation phases or whatever, or changes of societies in Central and Eastern Europe on this time scale. Here, for example, 5000 BC, here 3000 BC. And I just want to show this to you because it's a kind of translation of our archaeological or environmental data into conflict, ideology, inequality, soil quality also, and so on and so on. And what is visible, and this is my only message from this, let's say, interesting wall painting, the message is that the changes which are visible around 3000 BC are not as transformative for the whole society as they had been during other periods. This is also visible if we get closer, for example, in the Mittelelbe-Saale area, so central Germany, in the area of Halle. This is just a depiction of the time period. We would like to concentrate here on the, let's say, 3000 BC, so the main appearance of Globular Amphorae. The background here is the land opening, but important for us are the archaeological records. And there in blue or in green or in whatever color, you could detect, for example, changes in the construction of the houses or the huts or whatever, and or the copper metallurgy. And even here, it is quite clear that 3000 BC, 2800 BC is not such a deep transformation as we talking about Globular Amphorae or Cordedver or Berlbeke or Yamnaya would expect it. So this is a kind of background information for the question how intensive these transformations had been. Oh yeah, okay. So.
Yes, thank you. After this background, we turn back to the Globular Amphora, of course. First of all, as Johannes told, the Globular Amphora phenomenon was spread over very wide areas of Europe during a period of transformations, as he just told. The last centuries of the 4th millennium and the first centuries of the 3rd millennium BC were the time of the most intensive development of the population, the material remains of which we refer to as the Globular Amphora culture, phenomenon, society. Something new also is possible. One of the key features of the Globular Amphora phenomenon, now relatively well recognized, is the combination of universals and regionalisms. The umbrella name, Globular Amphora, refers to universality, to the common features that form the basic structure of cultural patterns, interpreted nowadays as the communication network that is being recognized in the wide areas of today's Central and Eastern Europe, from the Rhine to the Dnieper and from the Baltic Sea to the Bohemian Basin and Moldavian upland. However, when we look deeper under the umbrella of the Globular Amphora name, regional dissimilarities are clearly marked. Considerable variations between the different regions, even if they are located not far from each other, are visible in many of the aspects under study. Another characteristics of great importance for the interpretation is that there was no such instance that the people associated with the Globular Amphora composed the entire human population in a given area at any point of time. The opposite argument seems to be more reasonably supported. This population often coexisted, competed, or cooperated with other communities, both on the Odra and Vistula River, as well as outside these areas. This will be a subject of our second presentation, the last keynote in this session. This time our goal is to show how important and effective is to link even partial information from a wide variety of archives that are now accessible: environmental, economic, social, and cultural, including geo and bioarchaeological data. As a result, the significance of the Globular Amphora phenomenon on a continental scale can be better recognized than even a few decades ago. Yeah.
Yes, to come back to the, let's say, the environmental or the economic aspect of Globular Amphorae, we would like to get into one of the regions, the Altmark, that's somewhere between Moscow and Lisbon, or it's somewhere between Berlin and Hanover. There we had a research project with different excavations, but also with, I think, 6 or 7 pollen analysis, which helped us to reconstruct, beside macro-rest analysis, the economy around 3000 BC. The red dots here are Globular Amphorae. Within this area, these are 50 kilometers. And the bluish ones and the other ones are mainly from the partly contemporary funnel beaker societies. For example, at the Betzendorfer Bruch, we got a palynological record where for the times of the Globular Amphorae, both is visible. On the one hand, the increase of Plantago lanceolata, but on the other hand, also the increase on cereals and settlement signs. And it is, if we deep a little bit deeper in this, in the time scale between 3400 and 2600 BC, it is quite obvious that with this Globular Amphorae, on the one hand, here this yellowish are cereals, so cereals are present, but on the other hand, it is also visible that the openness of the landscape, and especially Plantago lanceolata, is increasing immensely in this time period, and obviously the openness and the herding is increasing, on the one hand beginning with Globular Amphorae and then continued also in the corded there or the single grave culture. At the same, to make it shorter, at the same time, it is clear that that Globular Amphorae are engaged also in, I don't know, gardening or whatever. At least barley and wheat were used by them. And with the calibration of the pollen analysis on a bigger scale, on the one hand, so with the programs of Refields and Love, it became on the one hand clear that we are still talking about a landscape which is 80% forested. But on the other hand, in the settlement course, this Betzendorfer Bruch, there is a continuous increase in the opening of the landscape between 3200 and 2600 BC, so the continuous development from Globular Amphorae to the corded ware, which is there called single grave societies. At the same time, we can detect, to put it this way, a decrease, at least in human activities, as they are represented in pollen analysis, represented in C14 dates. You could detect here around 3000 BC a kind of peak in activities, but then reduced activities following at settlement sites, which is also represented by all C14 dates from all types of sites. We excavated one site, Oldenburg LA77, around 3000 BC. There is a cereal matrix with wild plants important there, but it was also possible to identify the cuisine, or at least the preparation for, let's say, interesting cuisine with different activities in respect to cooking. Oh, sorry.
Yes, and on the to continue, on the overall scale, the relatively frequent use by the communities of the Globular Amphora of sites that have already been used by people is clear. At the micro-regional scale, research on this issue was carried out in Kujawy, this is central Poland. It was found here that almost 50–60% of globular amphora sites overlapped with earlier funnel beaker sites. Also, such detailed surveys have not been carried out outside Kujawy. A general similarity in the location of sites related to the globular amphora and funnel beaker was observed, for example, in Mecklenburg, East Holstein, and Pomerania. And here we have Halle. Halle-Dolauer Heide, overlapping with Bernburg settlement. The similarities in or even overlapping of settlement patterns can be interpreted in few ways. We will discuss this topic in a broader perspective in our second lecture. However, this time let us pause at the observations that these communities were keen to appear in the places that had already been deforested and utilized, at least in some regions. In all the better recognized regions of the globular amphora, knowledge of and adaptation to local resources is evident. This was best recognized in the flint industry and also in use of local temper sources in Middle Elbe-Saale area. Research in the Polish lowlands has revealed that local erratic flint was here the most often used. Its average share reaches up to 80% of all flint products and sometimes even amount to 100. It was acceptable, this is interesting, it was acceptable to use even small flint lumps, nodules, and therefore small final products. In contrast to this was the use of imported flint of good quality for special purposes. Also well identified were local deposits of rocks suitable for use in grave construction, as well as being made into tools and added to clay as the most typical temper material. And we have here results of this analysis in, as I told, in the Middle Elbe-Saale area. What about subsistence economy? The data set is quite wide now. Biological remains so, include predominantly animal bones and to much lesser extent also plant relics. Johannes just told about a part of this. Important information also comes from the examination of human remains. The zooarchaeological remains can be divided into some categories. For example, remains of meat consumption, often in the form of damaged or broken bones in the context of settlements or funerals or graves. This evidence comes mostly from the central group of the globular amphora, especially from Kujawy. And the second category consists of deposits in which the bodies of selected animals were laid. The often used term animal burials is for these deposits. And we can look here for the diagram where we can cattle, pigs, and sheep, goats, and three different contexts of using these animals. And we can recognize preferences in selecting specific animals for different spheres of human activities, including ritual acts. And so, for example, pigs was first and foremost an animal providing food and attention should be paid to the frequency of peaks consumption during funeral and post-funeral practices in funeral places. However, it was only occasionally laid in the deposits in the sphere of sacrum. And sheep and goats, this is this part, were animals with limited sacred values. Only the role of cattle was almost the same in the sphere of profanum and sacrum. It was animal species most frequently used in daily consumption, and it dominated completely in the symbolic consumption. In contrast to this, the direct data on plant use and processing are much more modest. The new data from Altmark Johannes just presented. We have, of course, imprints on clay. We have some macrofossils, mostly from Moravia, and we have some tools used for processing of plants. To summarize, this is evidence that the globular amphora communities were based on a subsistence economy in which the greater role has been played by animal husbandry. Meat production and consumption, along with milk, provided most of the food. Use of plant food was rather limited. Significance of animal products in human diet is proven by analysis of lipids preserved in clay vessels, and also confirmed by stable isotopes analysis of human remains. The diet of until now analyzed individuals, both males and females, as well children, was rich in animal proteins. There are also sporadic signals that animal food intake increased with age, but it is reasonable to assume that regional variants were possible, but they have not yet been fully identified. Strontium isotope analysis point towards a local origin of both humans and animals, with a kind of seasonal mobility within a limited small regions. Until now, this was concluded in few cases in southern and northern Poland, in the middle Elbe Saale area, and in the northern Germany. The presence of numerous ceremonial animal deposits makes one wonder about the efficiency of the economy of the globular amphora societies. This is our proposal. The starting point is the following statement. Laying down whole animals, most often cattle, or selected parts of their carcasses meant, in fact, exclusion of some quite considerable food resources from daily consumption. An extreme example of this is the cemetery in Krasnosielski, near Smolensk, today Russia. In the upper Krasnosielskoye, in the upper Neman River, today Belarus, where alongside human graves an object with animal deposits was found, the remains of 13 animals, including 7 entire cows and parts of next two, were buried in it, which equals to minimum more or less 700 kilograms of meat and other products. Such a large amount was excluded from daily consumption and transferred to symbolic consumption. This quantity provided a meat supply for, as we can see here, a meat supply of 55 kilograms per year for at least 13 people. So quite quite big group, and estimation was based on data from Alpine Palafit settlement. I can say that in 2020, global meat consumption was amount 34 kilograms per capita. So, and the second comment. It must be assumed that the animals killed for ritual purposes and excluded from daily consumption came from larger herds. Their size can be attempted to be estimated if we treat the number of ritually deposited animals as a proxy. And this Krasnosielski site is the good example, because all deposited animals were slaughtered at the same time. The starting assumption is that 9 cattle individuals were rearing in the herd with a relatively natural sex and age structure and of stabilized size. Taking into account the average age that cattle live to, we are taking 4 and 8 years, the estimated herd sizes are as follows: from 36 until 72 cattle. In biological terms, this is the minimal size to ensure that the herd can be reconstituted after the elimination of 9 individuals whose remains were deposited in a pit. Other production branches, well, more or less recognized. There are plant processing, stone processing, flint processing, and I only comment shortly this dual technology in flint processing, because we have ad hoc production of flint tools for daily purposes and production of very elaborated macro tools from imported flints. So there are 2 absolutely different technologies used by the same people. And for these small products, only or exclusively erratic local flint was used, and for this beautiful axis, of course, imported from the south, flint was used. What about social archives? A limited number of structural relics have been recognized, which have been attributed with a residential function, houses or huts. We have here some examples. They represent 2 main types: post-frame structures and semi-subterranean dwellings or pit houses, with rectangular, oval, circular, or irregular outlines. Their inner floor area was between 10 and 60 square meters, small houses, small huts. But settlement infrastructure included mostly pits and post holes, and we have here the diagram which illustrates this situation. Only rarely, possibly, workshops for flint or stone processing have been identified. The same goes for the wells. Until now, we have only few wells related to the Globular Amphora settlement. Among the relics of the inhabitation sites, one can identify settlements and campsites. So campsites only with some pits, and settlements with these houses or huts. Mostly 1 house in the site, but from time to time we have sites with few houses, 3, 4, 5, not more. The majority of settlement sizes is below 3,000 square meters. It was here shown in the diagram. To summarize, the settlement remains can be described as rather middle and small in size and ephemeral in time. However, it is difficult to assess how long, weeks, months, years, they have been used. In this respect, unique information come from Żuławka Mała site, and we have here dendro datings of the wooden dam located in this site. And dendrochronological data indicate the use and repair of this wooden construction for 42 years. So another case is this small settlement in Opatowice with one house and 2 phases of occupation, 2 phases of reorganization of the space, dated, as you can see on the slide. We have also in the Globular Amphora some specialized economic activities and places. We have here a case of stone extracting site, Goszczewo, well-known Krzemionki mine, where the most elaborated chamber mines were made and used by Globular Amphora people, and Euler with more than 400 extraction pits in Germany. And some words about settlement patterns. The most recent is on the environmental setting of Neolithic and early Bronze Age sites, including those related to the Globular Amphora in the northwestern part of Poland. This is this map. In the areas between the Oder, the Baltic Sea, and the Vistula, about 2,700 Globular Amphora sites have been recorded, but there are sites from the field prospection, so not excavated. But a conclusion of GIS-based analysis is that Globular Amphora people were very good adapted to local conditions. So their settlement patterns generally were almost the same as what was offered by the environment in this location. But in some regions we have other tendencies. For example, in the Middle Elbe Saale, we have tendency to a strong orientation to more fluvial regions. And in the Havel region, we have orientation of the sites towards lakes and water sources, or in Lower Silesia to less and less like soils which were less frequently used, but more frequently used were rather unfertile regions. And Johannes, some words about estimating.
So it's the question, how many people are using all this cattle or this fuzzy structures or whatever? So is it possible to reconstruct the, let's say, the population size, or at least to come up with some estimation about how many people lived at this time? So in principle, with some estimations about the duration of these campsites and the duration of Globular Amphora in different micro-regions, there are several micro-regions where we are more or less sure that most of the sites had been excavated and had been recorded. And we end up, to put it this way, with a density of people at this Globular Amphora phenomena with 0.8 persons per square kilometer. And this is, at least for me, quite interesting, because if you look at the archaeodemographic estimations of population densities in Central Europe, we know from Zimmermann or also here from Müller that there are certain population densities associated, for example, with hunter-gatherers, or here with farmers, or here with state societies. And this 0.8 for globular amphora societies is more or less at the lower level of these farming societies. So it's somehow, it shows that we are really probably dealing with these people which are very much into gardening and not so much into farming and mainly into herding. Okay, and if you are very, was heißt mutig?
Courageous.
If you have courage, you could estimate from this 240,000 square kilometers that we are dealing with about 180,000 people using globular amphora. Oh, sorry.
Only short because the time is running. So a model of regional internal organization of small groups of the globular amphora people was proposed for Kujawy region. This is the fission-fusion model, very flexible, in fact, and probably it's not bad for the situation in Kujawy, but maybe not for all regions of the globular amphora culture. And some words about mobility, because we have two kinds of mobility in the globular amphora culture. First of all, this limited mobility, which was demonstrated by isotopic analysis of humans and animals, as well as extraction of raw materials. And we have, of course, this extensive mobility. And here on the map, we have two extreme sites. I mean, Tulinszczyna on the upper Dnieper, near Smolensk, Russia, and San Martin. I think Florian told today about San Martin in eastern Transylvania. There are clear traces of migration in such far region. And only some words about trans-regional communication networks, because we have common elements coded in potter ornamentation, and of course we have many regional variants which can be shown as a communication network. In fact, two communication networks, one in the west part and one in the central and eastern part. So this was the most important for the globular amphora people, for the globular amphora communities, for the globular amphora at all.